All right, thank you everybody for joining today's session on elevating the customer experience with Farmers Insurance. My name is Joe Stellan. I'm director of the Enterprise Architect team for Cognizant. And here with me today, I have Arjun and Harshal. Arjun, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arjun Chatterjee, and I'm head of IT for service operations and claims at Farmers Insurance. And me and my team support all the IT applications across claims and service operations, and primarily all the channels that impact our customers, agents, and employees. So happy to be here and looking forward to a good interactive session with all of you. Harshal?
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Harshal Pimpalkhote. I'm a principal product manager with Amazon Lex, and I work with some of our top customers and partners to drive product strategy. I've been working with Farmers and with Cognizant on a chatbots project, and that's going to be the focus of our discussion today.
Thank you, gentlemen. So for today's agenda, we're going to discuss actually Farmers Insurance and who they are in the marketplace. We're going to go through the solution. We're going to go through the architectural design, the services that were leveraged, the interaction flow between those services, and then the key findings. So Arjun, can you tell us a little bit about Farmers Insurance?
Absolutely. So Farmers Insurance is a 91-year-old company. We've been in the business for over 91 years. We are proud to serve more than 15 million policies nationwide. We have a network of about over 45,000 exclusive agents and independent agents that service the book of insurance for farmers. And we have about 20,000 employees across the country. We are headquartered in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles, one of the few insurance companies on the West Coast, so pretty happy about that.
Thank you, Arjun. That was a good overview. So Arjun, to my understanding, some of the business drivers that initiated this project was essentially to kind of promote self-service. It was to reduce the wait times, and it was also to increase the scalability and efficiency of the solution. So can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that so we have a better understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. So self-service, right? This is something that all of us like. I mean, we all want to get the information, get the answers based on our schedules and based on when we want it. And our customers and agents are no different. Right? So given an opportunity to them to either call or get the answers via chat, clearly everyone wants to chat. You know, not many people want to talk to anyone, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever the case might be. But what we have seen is that giving them the channel where they can self-service, we can get the answers on their own schedule, is definitely something there is a big need for. So that definitely was something that we were looking for from a business driver perspective, is how can we improve and encourage our customers and agents to go down the self-service route because there is a need for it in the marketplace. Now, from an agent standpoint, what the agents want is they want information when they want it. They want in and out. They want quick information. There's not so much fluff as much required. So it's like, hey, give me this. I have this question. Give me the answer. I'm out of here, right? So that's something which is perfect from a chatbot standpoint. And that was actually one of our first use cases when we embarked on this journey, I would say about 2.5 years back. Test and learn, right? Small steps. We were stepping into some different areas we have not done before from an AI standpoint, ML standpoint. So that was our first use case, giving that capability to our agents where they could chat in, FAQs, frequently asked questions. If I have a question, the answer is already there. Instead of them having to rummage through tons of articles or going to different areas, we provided them that information via chat. Very well received. We also did some easy bookends, which was like the greeting, welcome and closing the chat off. It might sound trivial from an overall standpoint, but when you multiply the number of interactions we have on a daily basis, the amount of customers we have, and when you look at the contact center environment, it really kind of adds up. So that was our first use case. And of course, moving on to the next one, when we're talking about helping reducing wait times, I mean, no-brainer, right? I mean, given the opportunity to call someone, be on the IVR, wait, or whatever the case might be, chat, again, is a great mechanism, is a great channel for us to provide that information back and the agent to go about their way and get the information they need. So those definitely were two important business drivers from a customer agent standpoint. And again, from scalability and operational efficiency standpoint, chat platform provides that capability where you can provide our employees the ability to multitask. A phone comes in, you can only take one phone call at a time, but from a chat standpoint, everyone can take in multiple chats, right? Operational efficiency kind of is extremely important, but what you also have to remember is the customer experience side of the things, right? So back in the days when we were doing it, it was all about, hey, efficiency and how can we reduce cost and so on, but we very quickly learned that it should not just all be about cost. Customer experience is extremely important as well. And if you see today, AI and ML is kind of almost tilting more towards the customer experience, because if you don't have the right customer experience, operational efficiency, channels are redundant. It just doesn't matter. So from that standpoint, we had to bake all of that in and make sure that while we're encouraging self-service, you won't have a channel where people actually have high adoption. They come in there and ask the questions and take it forward and have a good customer experience as they move forward in the journey.
Great. So I know you had mentioned use cases. So when you first embarked on this journey, and I know that you had mentioned some use cases, but in the beginning, did you identify specific use cases, and then there were performance indicators as well to develop some form of success criteria that you know that this project is heading down a successful path?
Absolutely. And again, we went through a learning curve ourselves, right? So when we are talking about use cases, one of the most important things, and one takeaway that I would ask you guys to walk away with, is spend a lot of time upfront to look at the current state environment. It is extremely important to see where you are today. Do that analysis, go back 6 months, a year, whatever the case might be, look at your chat transcripts or calls or whatever is required, and ensure that you understand the current state, because without understanding the current state and where you are today, it is going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to build that journey as you look into the future. So one of the things that we did was we did a lot of analysis, right? I mean, again, with AI and these cool technologies, you just want to jump in and let's do it. Let's get the technology going and let's see how it pans out. But you got to control yourself, go back, look at what you have today, and then identify the use cases, right? High volume stuff, low complexity. Now, even in that segment, you want to look at stuff that is not too complex. So what we call is a volley, which is interaction between a human and the bot. You don't want to have too many volleys. Because that, again, kind of loses the pizzazz of bringing in AI. You want to have 2 or 3, and then very quickly be able to transition over to a live person, because we've all encountered that at some point time in our lives. You're talking to a bot, the bot doesn't understand what the heck you're saying, and it keeps going on, you get frustrated. You do not want that experience, right? So very important to identify high volume, low complexity, but even within that high volume and low complexity, look at stuff that is 2 or 3 volleys, right? So you can get that information very quickly back to the customer or agent, and if not, transfer over to a live person. So that definitely is extremely important. Again, narrowing down functional areas. Functional areas would be areas that maybe have certain amount of complexity built into them, and you want to be careful around that aspect as well. If I give this information back, the information that you're giving back to your customers and agents has to be pristine and clear, so that the opportunity for them to, again, have to ask 5 different questions is not there. They get what they want, get go, or maybe another volley, right? So that's kind of important as well. I spoke about the simple task, high repetition, and absolutely start with low complexity. I mean, if any one of you are looking to embark on an AI journey, just start bare bones, just start at the minimum complexity task, because it's going to be a learning experience. And one of the things that we did was, start with like FAQs, frequently asked questions, and so on, and then kind of graduate and gravitate towards more complex tasks as you go forward. So that, in a nutshell, was our use case identification. And then the performance indicators, the KPI, is extremely important, right? So while all of us are super gung-ho about building AI and models and so on, you got to make sure that you are tracking and you have the right amount of reporting and analytics as well, because you want to see how your dollars are doing, the ROI, and all of the good stuff. So from that standpoint, we started off in our journey, when we had the small use cases, it was a little bit more on the manual side, but very quickly we moved towards analytics and reporting. And I have to say, Amazon did a great job, and one of the things that they do really well is work with the customers, right? And they will take your feedback and build that into their roadmap. So we had a really good engagement with Cognizant, with Amazon. We brought the team together, kind of said, okay, here's what we want to do. How do we bring that information in so that it's not a manual process? Because what you do want to do with AI is you want to scale. And if you go to scale, you got to make sure you have automated analytics, reporting, so you can see how you want to pivot and take things forward. Because it's not a once and done, right? With AI and the model, you got to keep tuning it. And you will not be able to tune it unless you know how it's performing. And without reporting analytics, you'll never understand how it's performing. So extremely important to have those performance indicators. And of course, have some models baseline with respect to where you started, what your current spend was, expense, and how your ROI is fitting in from overall standpoint.
Yeah, so it sounds like, part of the key element to the success of this was that strategizing and collaboration between all three teams.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is kind of now pointed more towards Harshal, the question, which is, I know that, Cognizant, Farmers, and AWS teams have worked closely together on this. Everything from the overall design and strategizing together, ensuring that these teams are working seamlessly together, and then obviously in-depth testing, including the utterance testing, so that regardless of who is actually calling in, the system is able to identify what they're saying. Do you maybe want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. We often work with customers who want to use technology to transform their businesses, right? And does not matter what this technology is going to do, whether it's going to reduce wait times or help with self-service or reduce the costs eventually, right? Underlying is always a business problem to solve. And when we engaged with Arjun and Joe and Cognizant team, what we attempted to do first was understand what their business drivers were. Arjun just walked us through those. Reducing wait times was an important one. Self-service was another. But all of this had to be achieved while we did not compromise on the customer experience. Like Arjun mentioned, nothing matters if you achieve all of the above, but your customer experience is suboptimal. So that's the balance that we were trying to strike as we designed this system, working with Farmers, working with Cognizant, and coming up with a holistic solution. So once we understood those goals and what they wanted to achieve, what we did was looked at our tool set at all the AWS services and came up with a short list of services that would help us deliver to their goals. And Amazon Lex was one of the services that was perhaps critical in the entire solution. To those of you who may not be familiar with Amazon Lex, it's a service to build voice and text chatbots. In this case, we were building a text chatbot working with Farmers. And with Lex, you provide a few phrases. We call them sample utterances. Think of it as training data. You provide training data, and we build a chatbot for you. Easier said than done. That's the short of it. You can easily build a chatbot within a few minutes, but like Arjun alluded to earlier, it takes iterations to build a really good chatbot that does not compromise on some of your key tenets as you have laid them out. So we identified Amazon Lex as one of the key services. Great. Now we have the tool set. What's our approach, right? That's where we worked together, collaborated together with Farmers and with Cognizant to come up with where do we begin. We decided to go small first, take baby steps, start out with a simple use case, and then expand on that use case. So just to give you an example, right? If you're looking at a chatbot, how many functions do you want to support on day one? Is it 2? Is it 5? Is it 15 or is it 30, right? And our recommendation is to start out with 2 or 5. Just go small first and build through iteration. You're going to hear that from all three of us today, which is the iterative process of building chatbots. So because we decided to go with an iterative process, we had to stick to agile methodology as opposed to a waterfall approach to development. Joe, waterfall versus agile, you want to speak a little bit about that, on how Cognizant viewed it?
Yeah, so I think it was to your point as taking baby steps. So really the first aspect of that really was, when we're looking at it from a design approach perspective, really was to come in and the first very step was to analyze the current state, right? And then what we did is we identified those gaps. And then we started developing the bot around those identified gaps. Once we did that, there were times where we actually had to go back, brainstorm, and then come back and make the changes that were necessary to get to the point to where we were to achieve success.
Yes. So I'll add to that, right? So I think, as I mentioned earlier, the designing of the chatbot process, it's extremely important for you to have your frontline people involved in the process, right? So while Amazon knows the technology and Cognizant has done this before, the customer, the farmers' people were there front and center because they understand the interaction and the customer experience as we move forward, right? So it's not entirely technical implementation. The design process, the designing of the chatbot process, how the customer experience is going to flow, all of that is extremely important to have your frontline supervisors, contact centers, whatever the case might be in there, because they have interacted with customers and agents their whole lives, right? They know all nuances of, hey, if I give this answer, how would they feel, how would they react, and so on. And not being there in the front line, we would have a completely different perspective. So it was a learning curve for us as well. So what we did very quickly was we brought those people into that entire design process as well. Say, hey, here's what we're going to do. And again, the good thing about Agile is that you can iterate, you can build in capabilities and move to production very quickly, and you can demo all of that stuff. So before we would push something out of production, we do the demo and get feedback. And based on the feedback, we would pivot if required. So extremely important in that process.
Right, so from a phase perspective, it was identify the use cases, identify the performance indicators,
That's right. Yep.
Analyze the actual current state, identify where those gaps are based on the findings, then obviously start developing that bot around those findings, and then as we continue to move forward, put milestones in place along the journey to see if we are hitting those milestones, and if we're not, go back, find out where that delta is to make those changes to ensure that we're heading down a successful path.
Yes. Do you mind going back one slide?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So to add to what Arjun and Joe just mentioned, I want to take a moment and talk about the collaboration piece. Collaboration is important across Farmers, Cognizant, and AWS, but I want to drill down a little bit and talk about collaboration within a team. This is an emerging technology. To many of us, this is a new skill set. So how do you think of the composition within a team? So the farmers teams and the Cognizant teams that we worked with had the technical chops. We had the project management chops to get the process going. But there are a couple of skill sets that you either have to upskill or add to your team. I wanted to talk about two such skill sets. One is a voice UI designer. This is a new role, if you may, in the industry. Very difficult to find really good voice UI designers. And think of them as the counterparts of graphical user designers, except that they design conversations. So you take a look at who is the customer, who's going to consume the chatbot, what are the different ways they might engage, the modalities. In this case, it was a text chatbot. It was an insurance agent. How would an insurance agent talk to a chatbot? What are the different types of requests you would get, right? Some people have a pretty direct way of interacting, especially if they're on chat, almost like typing keywords, keyword chats as we call it. Others might have a more elaborate, complete sentences as they type, as if they were speaking, right? So you have the voice UI designer has to take into consideration all of the above, all of the different styles of the end user. The other piece that you have to keep in mind is what is the demographics that you're engaging with. In this case, the persona was fairly well defined, and Arjun is going to talk about it in the next couple of slides. But it was an insurance agent, right? We understood that pretty well. But let's say you have a chatbot that is open to a broader demographic. How do you engage with such users then? What I talked about so far was the request or the input side of the story. Now let's talk a little bit about the output, or how do you respond to this user. The voice UI designer comes up with entire transcripts of what you should respond with. In case of farmers, we looked at past chat transcripts. We asked for who is your model contact center agent, or a model agent. It's a customer service agent is what I mean, who you would consider as top tier when responding or providing a good customer experience, right? And we model our responses based on such a person, or such a customer service agent. So that's about the UI design. The other piece which I also wanted to cover was the Q&A or the testing piece, and we'll talk more about it in one later slide. But you have to start out, like I said, small. Testing also starts out small. You start out with your immediate team that developed the prototype. In case of Arjun's team, we tested strictly internally first within the immediate team with the project manager and the technical owner who was leading that effort. And then we slowly expanded to the line of business, going broader internal, and then eventually to your external entities. That's what we recommend your testing methodology to be as well. It's always in expanding circles so that you get that control, you get that direct line of feedback from these users as you tune and continuously enhance your chatbot.
Thank you.
Sorry, one other piece that I wanted to mention on the previous slide. So an important aspect of the design is also, do you do a menu-based or a free-flow-based, or what kind of experience do you provide, right? So if it's going to be a small chatbot where there are a few intents or a few goals that the bot allows you to achieve, our recommendation is do a menu-based, provide a few response cards, and the users can perhaps click through such an interface, right? And they could chat as well, but we want to upfront guide them with what the conversation is going to be. So it's more of a guided format. As opposed to that, free-flowing is a experience that we would recommend when you have a bot that does maybe 20 different functions. And when you're doing 20 different functions, it's going to be difficult to provide a guided experience. At that point, you rather ask the end user, okay, how may I help you today? And then respond accordingly. So those are the two that you should keep in mind as you go through your voice UI or chat UI design.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Harshal, is it again comes back to your business drivers, right? What kind of experience do you want to have via the chatbot? So I had mentioned earlier the volley, right? So with a guided chatbot, you can reduce the number of volleys, because if you ask a question and there are 3 potential answers, you can throw that out in the guided flow, and they can click on one, and then the chat or the conversation ends because they got what they wanted. If you keep it free-flowing, then the volleys might be more than 3 or 4 based on, hey, do you mean this or that, whatever the case might be. So again, it all comes back to the design and the experience that you want to have for your customers and agents. Based on that, you should pivot to free-flowing, or you want to have a guided flow.
Okay. So sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
So basically, when you're looking at the slide that you're seeing above now is really taking a look at really these layers that are incorporated into the overall solution itself. So kind of to start out at the bottom with the back-end and front-end office systems is to ensure that we're identifying all the upstream and downstream dependencies and enabling those integrations. So when we're looking at this environment holistically, we know that from an integration perspective, it works seamlessly. So that's kind of like the first layer in this component of the actual solution itself, which is obviously pretty important.
Yeah. And as you go up the stack, you notice there are microservices. I wanted to take a moment to talk about this aspect. So when we started out 2.5 years ago, we were focused on one chatbot, and the journey has since evolved. We are getting broader interest with more customers and even within farmers across different lines of businesses. And this is going to happen in every enterprise, where you start out with one line of business, but pretty soon it's going to be other parts of the organization that will also want to build bots. Said differently, there is going to be many different bots that you have to manage eventually, but your end user is going to remain the same, right? So you have this challenge of managing like 5 or 10 different bots and provide a uniform experience to your end users. And that was one of our learnings engaging with farmers, where we saw this need for managing multiple bots coming into the picture. And that's now part of our vision, where we want to provide a seamless way so that many lines of businesses can have their own individual chatbots and yet provide a uniform interface to the end user.
So I think, basically as we go up the layers and we go from the front end to the back end, and as we achieve the solution in its entirety, is ensuring that we are doing the proper UAT testing extensively to ensure that all of the integration is taking place, all of the layers are working properly, and we're getting the performance and the results in which the goals and milestones in which we set at that point.
All right, so I want to take a few minutes to talk about the detailed architecture that we implemented during the engagement. Our goal, as Arjun described earlier, was to keep the volley short, have a meaningful interaction, but if the bot is not able to handle it, then hand it over to the customer service representative or the CSR, right? So which is why, if you look at this slide, you'll see on the top right is your automated responses coming from databases or a database. And at the bottom right is your CSR module. It's fronted by an API gateway, but behind the scenes is a CSR or a human agent representative answering the questions. So those are the two key elements that you have to keep in mind. So let's walk from left to right sequentially. So the user asks a question. In this case, it's an insurance agent. Starts the chat, asks a question. The question is now processed by Amazon Lex. Lex figures out what the intent is, and if the intent is one that was configured, then it does a dip into the database. That's your number 5, accessing the database piece and gets an answer. One quick note is Lex natively integrates with AWS Lambda. AWS Lambda is our serverless architecture, which allows you to run your business logic on the service side. So that's the main piece, the Lex plus Lambda. You get the response, and then you send it back to the user. So this is the happy case. Everything works well in the scope of the design that we described earlier. Now, consider a case where Lex is not able to respond, right? Or Lex doesn't understand what the user said. Maybe it is beyond what was configured, or maybe it was configured, but Lex did not figure it out accurately, right? Then what do? At that point, you send it to the API gateway, and the CSR responds to it. So the key thing over here is, how do you detect that the user input was not understood? So Lex recently launched a feature called fallback intent. I encourage you to take a look at it. The fallback intent is triggered when none of the other intents are matched. So user comes in and says something. Let's say the bot was designed for when's my next insurance payment due, or what are the student discounts that we offer today. Maybe those are the two intents that the bot is supposed to serve. And someone comes along and says completely different. Can you help me update my service address, which is not what the bot was designed to do. At this point, the fallback intent will be triggered. It will go down to API gateway, and a human agent will engage. So this is one way of dealing with unexpected input and handing it over to a human agent. Another way to do something similar, it's not captured in this slide, but you could use simple notification system or SNS service, right? Wherein you register, the Lambda function registers with the SNS and says, okay, we had a question that was not, that we couldn't answer. I'm just letting you know, and then the user sees gets the information that somebody will be in touch with you shortly. When the SNS queue gets drained, that's when a CSR agent reaches out to the end user, to the customer. So that's an alternate way of doing it. But the goal is that all of this should be as seamless as possible. Going back to perhaps the most important tenet that Arjun described earlier, the customer experience should not be compromised. So that's what the architecture looked like on the farmer side.
So the only thing I would add to that is do keep in mind that this is just a sample architecture, and what you're seeing there's obviously multiple ways to do this. This is leveraging native services. So not only are you reaping the benefits of the performance, but you're actually lowering your overall cost when you're leveraging Lambda within the actual architectural design itself.
Yeah, I'll just add, so back to what you were saying, right? The transfer passes to the CSR, which is the rep servicing that customer or agent. You have to make sure that the transfer is seamless. So you do not want your rep to, again, ask the same questions to the customer and agent that they were trying to get through on the chatbot, right? So when the transfer comes over to the CSR, it should also come over with the historical chat or the information, everything that had happened in the background. So it's a warm transfer, and then the person can take the conversation forward from where they left off with the bot. So.
Yep. All right, so we spoke about design, we spoke about architecture. I want to spend some time talking about the testing piece. Often what we have noticed is as customers are adopting, as enterprises are adopting chatbot technology, there is focus on development for sure that comes naturally to all of us, right? The design with the caveats that I mentioned, more or less eventually we figure out that like Arjun described, it is the short volleys, it's the customer experience that we have to keep in mind, right? But in my experience, testing is perhaps the area that we need to focus on the most for several reasons, right? This is emerging technology, yes, but also for the first time we are doing like voice interfaces and chat interfaces, which are automated using machine learning. And you have to monitor these and tune these continuously. So what you see here on this slide is 3 types of testing that we recommend. There is the intents testing, and I'm going to talk about it, the automation and the services piece, right? So as far as the intents testing goes, this is all the different functions that the bot is able to provide. So let's say it's a claim status, it's a payment setup, and the repair of your auto, of your vehicle, right? What you need to do is you need to test this, like I said, gradually, starting out with the immediate team that tests it, then you go into perhaps a pilot internally, and then you gradually expand it to your external entities. Even when you go to your external entities, we recommend that you go through a pilot to a selected few, get their feedback, and then go a full production. Even when you go full production, there's going to be rounds of tuning that happen after you're in production. So similar to website launches, we recommend like an A/B testing. Lex makes it easier to do that with our alias functionality, but you can do a control group with your newly developed features on a subset of the population, and then the rest of them get a different alias, right? So that's our recommendation when it comes to an ongoing testing, and all of this is for intents. Some of the more creative ways that I have seen, and these are more early on in your life cycle, is you set up survey groups. I have spoken with a customer who has gone out to the cafeteria and just handed the chatbot saying, okay, can you try it? And receive feedback. And this is all valuable feedback as you go through the many rounds of testing. So that's the intents, that's the conversation design, if you may. I'll move to the rightmost, and then I'll come back to services. Test automation or regression testing is extremely important. What our recommendation here is you set up, that you follow an 80-20 rule. So let's say you have 1,000 utterances. You reserve 80% of those for your training data, which is the data that you use to build the chatbot. But then you have 20% of those utterances as your test data. This is a blind set that none of us actually see, right? And as you go through the many rounds of testing, this is your golden data set that should always pass. If you see regressions in this 20%, then something has gone wrong and you need to go back and fix it. One other recommendation that we have is you have to temper your reaction to any regressions. What I mean by that is wait for an aggregated data set or aggregated feedback to arrive. This will keep your bot stable through the many different cycles of testing. And the last piece is the services testing. This is where your APIs are tested with your backend systems. There are multiple data combinations, all of which have a cascading effect to your bot model. So keep that in mind as well. So each of these three pieces serve important or play an important role as you tune your bot over a period of time.
So Ajay, maybe you could just tell us, in your opinion, and also based on Farmer's experience, some of the key learnings that you achieved during this process and project.
Sure, absolutely. So again, we are still undergoing and going through our journey on chatbot and AI. So we are still learning, but over the last couple of years, based on what we've implemented, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. You have to understand your current landscape. Make sure that you understand what you have today and where you really want to go. Right? I mean, that's extremely important. Get the conversational AI, get that experience in there, and understand that journey. Number two is try to segment your journey out, like Harshal mentioned and Joe mentioned, right? Don't try to boil the ocean, go small, right? Take baby steps, but then have a vision where you want to get to over a period of time, right? So one of the things you can look at doing is look at simple, medium, complex, right? Simple would be just getting information in, maybe a FAQ. A medium would be, the bot goes and brings information back to your customer or to the agent or CSR, whatever the case might be. And complex, maybe the bot goes and makes changes to the system, right? If you frame it out, then you have a good kind of a roadmap and pipeline and what you want to do and what you want to achieve over a period of time. I spoke about analytics and monitoring, extremely important, right? Without knowing that, you're driving blind. You have no idea, is it helping you? Is it not helping you? How's the ROI looking, and so on. One other thing also I'll add is this whole ROI component, right? So when you're building a brand new bot, my recommendation would be to kind of look at it as a foundational aspect that you're building, right? Because every time we go in for a project and so on, there's a question of ROI and everything else. So ROI definitely has to be there, but maybe that is step two, right? You want to have the foundation, set that up, test and learn, right? And then iterate from there, take it forward. And like all of us have been saying, it's a journey, right? There's a lot of iteration, there is a lot of tuning, right? And it'll keep evolving. And what is working today may not work tomorrow based on the customer needs, preferences, and so on. Mm-hmm. So that is something you'll have to be aware of as well. And keep an eye out. The good thing about the Lex bot is it's from Amazon. It powers Alexa. There are hundreds and millions of devices out there, and it's self-learning, right? So anything that the Lex bot learns, that capability comes into us, as part of the offering. So that to me is definitely a big plus point as well. And it's continuous learning that the Amazon Lex brings in to our environment and so on. You covered the automated testing for voice utterances, extremely important because, again, that goes back to the whole tuning aspect of stuff. Last but not the least is capturing the agent feedback. So that, I think, is another important cog in the wheel, because you want to get the feedback, because from our standpoint, what is working fine, working well, may not be so much so from an end user perspective. So that feedback loop is extremely important. Bring that in, iterate. You may not be able to accomplish or accommodate all of them, but there will be some learnings, which will be some aha moments saying, wow, I never thought about it that way, right? So bring that in, iterate, push it production, see how it works, and keep tuning the bot. So that in a nutshell is some of the things that we learned when we went through our journey, and we are still going through our journey on the chatbot and AI conversational piece.
So thank you, gentlemen. And I think the key to the success of this project was really the true collaboration between all three teams seamlessly. Even though when there was obstacles, it still came back to going back and brainstorming together and collaborating. So thank you for that. So I think now it's basically time for us to open up for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them.
What did you use for AI layer?
You want to address?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Would you mind using the microphone so that we can?
Short people. What did you use for your AI layer, your Cognizant layer,
On the conversation layer?
on the conversational bot? Is
It's-
it one of AWS services, or is it something else?
Yeah, we use Amazon Lex. So Amazon Lex is a service that you can use to build chatbots in text and voice. So that's what we used.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm interested in how, you guys are obviously working on your FAQ, working through your early use cases. Interested in your vision to get to the complex use cases. What are some of your barriers to executing those, and how you're approaching your strategy and build?
Okay. So again, I wouldn't say so much of barriers. I think it's what aspirations you have from your business standpoint. And a simple answer is APIs, right? If you have the APIs built in, I mean, it makes life very simple, both for the medium and the complex use cases. So reuse APIs, have the API economy, use that, it can do wonders.
Excellent. I'm also from a financial institution, so we'd love to speak to you about authentication and PII.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Thanks.
Do you have statistics, performance statistics of your AVI versus human? For example, how long the conversation lasts usually on average, and then what's the percentage of resolved by bot and versus human?
Yes, so we definitely track that. That goes back to the analytics and monitoring. So what we call is the AHT, the average handle time, right? So average handle time of interaction with the person versus interaction with the bot. All of that is being measured. And we also have something what we call is partial containment versus full containment. So in some cases, the bot maybe does not close out the conversation, but does 60% of the conversation via the bot. So that's partial containment. And in some cases, you have the entire conversation fronted by the bot. So that is full containment. So yeah, we have all of the statistics, and that's something that we watch and measure on an ongoing basis.
Can you share what's the what's the number? I'm curious what the success criteria is, or what success rate you guys have.
Maybe we can take it offline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something we could probably discuss offline after the
All right.
presentation. Okay.
Well, so my question was actually going to be, what is containment, when you talked about it on the slide where you mentioned the performance indicators. And so now it's pretty obvious containment is when the bot handles the entire conversation. Do you have any support cases where there is no option, if the bot fails, to fall back to a human operator, or in all of your chatbot use cases, is there a human being fallback?
Absolutely, that's a key tenet, right? So anytime the bot does not answer a question, it has to immediately go to a live person. That's the whole customer experience we spoke about, right? That is critical, because like we said, if you can build the best bot in the world, but if the customer experience is crappy, it's not going to go anywhere. So you have to make sure that there is a live person who can answer and resolve that question or close out that conversation very quickly.
Nice. And so you mentioned you've been doing this for 2.5 years on this journey so far. Did you ever experiment without that human fallback early on and verify that it definitely is a bad user experience?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Have you seen a reduction in your voice calls since you've introduced the bot?
Yes, to a certain extent. So again, you also have to remember that the chatbot also hits your chat conversations as well, right? So if all your conversations are being fronted by a person and you bring in a bot there, your AHT kind of goes down from that standpoint as well. And again, it goes back to the use cases, right? Not all calls that come in would work for a bot use case. So it depends on how you look at stuff. Sure.
So it's a contextual question, for the business driver, how is this doing this or spending 2 years affecting the bottom line? What is the benefit ultimately? Are you reducing the workforce? What is the ultimate thing you're looking forward? You're trying to mimic the same experience that the customers had or the interact users had with bot now. So what are you gaining out of that?
Yeah, sure. So the fact that we are still taking forward the journey clearly has positive business implications. Otherwise, this would have been shut down long time back. So yes, short answer, definitely have business implications, positive business implications, and that's what we're looking to build on as we move forward.
Right, but what's the primary driver? Is it user experience? Is it optimization in costs? Or what's the primary driver for your implementation?
The top 3 drivers were what we discussed. So definitely user experience, operational efficiency, customer experience, and so on.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I had a question on the user interface that you use for the Lex. So it just said that the person actually talks to Lex, but what's the user interface there from the UI?
So the UI, and Arjun, feel free to jump in, is a web interface.
That's right.
That you use so that the insurance agents can talk to the chatbot.
Yes. So we have a chat platform, and the bot sits on top of the chat platform, right? So when the interaction comes in, instead of coming straight to the chat platform, it goes to the bot based on the architectural picture we saw earlier, and then based on the bot, if he can handle it or not, then passes it over to the chat platform.
So yeah, that was my next question. So if it is just a UI, then when you transfer it over to that Salesforce platform for the live agent, does that response go straight from there to the user interface as well?
So it still goes, so the way it works is it goes back to the Lambda function, and the Lambda function provides it to Lex, and then it goes to the end user.
Lex is always the...
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, if there's no more questions, we appreciate everybody's time. You have another question?
One more.
So it sounds like you're describing a voice chatbot, is that correct overall? Did you ever port this to a text-based chatbot or visual IVR? Have you looked at doing those things, and what has been reused from the architecture, if you have?
So we all of this was text chatbot, but we do also have a Alexa implementation, which is the voice chatbot, and a lot of reusability, I would say, because again, the underlying technology is the same. Lex is what runs the Lex chatbot, and Lex is what runs Alexa as well. So a lot of reusability amongst those two systems.
So Lex uses the same speech recognition as well as language understanding engine as Alexa. So we have a capability it's called export to Alexa format. So you can take a Lex chatbot, click a button and say export to Alexa, and it can be imported into the Alexa skills.
Great, thanks.
I think I have like two questions. As you mentioned, the Amazon Lex. If you can tell like what type of programming languages you guys use to build it.
So Lex is a managed service on the AWS platform, and we have our tool set, which includes all of the above, meaning Python, C, C++, all of these languages. But I think what the key here is the interface that we provide and the SDK support that we provide.
Okay.
So in terms of SDK support, we have, I believe, 9 different programming languages that are supported.
Sure. I think the second question is to Arjun, I guess. So this chatbot is placed on the web page in the Farmers Insurance, right? So is this like this chatbot is going to be authenticated by only Farmers Insurance customers, or is it going to be access to the whole public? For example, if I have a question around like my policy details,
right?
So if I'm not a customer, does this chatbot is going to start a session for me, or just says that you're not a customer?
So we have a combination of both.
Okay.
So for agent chatbot, that is authenticated. So the agents, if they want to access the chatbot, the chat platform, they have to authenticate themselves in the login, right? And then it's all taken care of based on your book of business. You'll provide the right amount of information. And then we also have a non-authenticated version for the customers that we provide based on certain authentication that we would normally ask them. So authentication, of course, is extremely important. I think you mentioned from a financial service perspective, highly regulated insurance industry. So yeah, we ensure that all authentication, all of that gets done before any information is sent out to the bot.
Okay. Is the authentication is happening through Lex chatbot, or else Farmers Insurance is doing it before redirecting to chatbot?
So there's 2 ways to do this, right? One is through on the client side, where you just have a username password as part of your single sign-on, perhaps, to get authenticated. But there is also a way you could do this through Lex, which is through session attributes. So you could capture the username password as a session attribute, encrypt it on the client side, feed it to Lex. It goes to Lambda, and on the Lambda you can decrypt it and authenticate.
It's
right.
like a cookie thing.
As a cookie, that's right. It's an out-of-band piece of data.
Okay.
Right. We have seen customers do multi-factor authentication as well, where you get a text message with a PIN code that lasts for, like, let's say 5 minutes, and you have to enter that, which again can be encrypted into session attributes and sent across.
Okay. Thanks. So this session is super helpful. I work for the American Family Insurance. we also have the similar kind of chatbots. This is
Cool.
well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So chat is a familiar interface, and voice is on the uptick. My daughter prefers to talk to our Alexa devices over typing into, her iPad. My question is, what's next? When do we activate the visual sense? When do we add that non-verbal layer of feedback? What's your take on that?
Well, there are so many things out there. So we got text, we got voice, visual. I mean, I have my own personal opinions on that, but it's going to evolve, right? It's all about the experience that customers today are having across different companies, right? Back in the days, if you were an insurance provider, you would measure yourself and your customer experience based on the experience the customer is having with other insurance companies. All of that has gone away now. Now you're competing with Amazon and Google because that's the experience everyone is having, and they don't care if it's Amazon, Google, or insurance company. They won't have the same experience, right? So it's going to be interesting. The next couple of years, I would say 5-6 years, a lot is going to change, and we're already seeing some of that happening, and we are kind of looking at some things ourselves as well. So,
and it might be more along the lines of emotional based, so based on the
Yep.
voice response and the reaction to certain things and how they're sensing that reaction to it alone before a visual aspect would be presented into the equation.
Just to add to what Arjun and Joe mentioned, there's two aspects to the visual component. One is emotions, where you try to understand the emotion based on the facial expressions. If the person is frowning, if they're smiling, and so on, right? That's one aspect. But perhaps a simpler piece is just gestures, right? If someone points to, let's say you're trying to order something and you say, I want that one, right? So you want to figure out the gestures to start out with, and perhaps a more advanced form is understanding the emotions. Where we really want to go is, we talk about modalities as text and voice, but it's not limited to text and voice, right? As human to human, when we talk between humans and humans, we look at the body language, we look at the expressions. So that's what the North Star is going to be.
When will AWS or when will Alexa device allow you to bring your own NLP like the other smart speakers out in the market? Is that in the works at all?
If I understand you correctly, you want to deploy your own NLP.
So when can you use your own NLP instead of Lex, which is used under the hood?
Got it. Yeah, currently that's not part of our plans, but we continuously take feedback from customers such as yourself and prioritize our roadmap.
It sounds like you're using this for like a help desk. Are you using it for claims at all?
Yes, we are.
Cool. Successfully?
Yes.
So I was just curious about the answers you provide to users. Do you manage the content centrally? How does that content get updated? So maybe the answer might change over time, and how are you dealing with that?
So good question. So yes, we do curate the content, and again, going back to the earlier conversation, right? You might have the best bot in the world, you might have the best technology, but if the interaction and the experience is not good, it's not going to go anywhere. And one of the pieces of interaction also is the knowledge and the content you're sending back to the agent or the customer. So yes, we have curated content which gets looked at by our folks, and we have that whole cycle that is continuous. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.